$100.
Okay, all right, that's what I was not understanding, and I was like, wow, that seems like a big increase to me. I mean,
It's right, it's not
Okay.
on the $9,000 in your example. It's on the
villages.
1,100.
Okay,
Correct.
So take the 9% of that. Yeah, we should,
okay, I think that, I mean, I don't know much about taxes, I'll be the first to admit that, but I'm sitting here thinking like, well, my husband just told me what our tax bill was, and now it's going up almost 10%. No, it's not.
I can't speak for the other taxing districts, I really
Okay.
don't know what they're doing, but I think just for our purposes, our taxes could potentially go up to 9.39% if we capture all the new growth that's available.
Right.
But it won't be, it can't be distributed dollar for dollar. You have some will pick up more, some will pick up less, depending on your assessment.
Okay.
so on the slide with the house graphic,
Okay, so
Right,
it's on this
Yeah,
portion here.
the 11,1199 to 13.2%.
right.
Right.
So again, I think it's important always to look at the different
Yes.
taxing, what's the right term?
Agencies.
Agencies, thank
yeah.
you. And we are talking about our percent
I
of that.
see.
Which
Okay,
is either $1,200, it looks like, or roughly just over $1,200, depending
All
on
right.
which school district you're in.
For a $9,000 tax bill.
Yes, yeah, for this
so
example.
thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, I think that's a big point of clarification.
Yes,
Yes.
for those dummies like me.
No, it's
7
complicated, the formula, and the formula that the county uses with the various, factors, it's a complicated process.
Right. What is it with government?
And we can
Yes.
put together some examples as to
I think
what
that would
an
be,
average tax bill would look like, so,
Yeah.
from the village's side, so.
right, I think that would be a good idea. In terms of the communications, whether on the website or a future Tower Topics, using, again, something similar to this and showing what it'll mean to the average household.
Right.
And then also, to your point about it, it's going to be different for different households.
Well, perhaps a sliding scale
Yeah, showing a 9.
composite would show.
Yep, different value houses, what it could mean. Yep. Great, thank you.
Any other discussion? In that case, Manager Velkme, the adoption schedule for the tax levy?
I believe December 18th is the date that we will hopefully adopt the proposed budget.
Okay, so we'll put that on the omnibus for December 18th?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there's nothing further on this public hearing, we'll close this public hearing.
So you have to do library tax levy.
No, we were going to talk about library underneath the budget, operating budget.
Up to you.
Mr. Bodavis, would you prefer? We have it under our tax levy, but we discussed it earlier and thought it would be more appropriate under the operating budget portion, but if you'd like to speak to both?
Sure. It's up to you. I can speak now since the
Sure.
Illinois library law requires the levy to be passed through the village.
Right.
But the budget is actually approved by the library board. So maybe now is the right time to talk about both. Or I can do it later. Whatever works for you,
That's
Alex.
fine.
That's fine, thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay. So as I mentioned, it's a function of Illinois library law that the levy for a municipal library is passed through the village. On November 28th, the library board passed their budget and made levy requests, which I will go through with you now. So the grand total of the Thomas Ford Memorial Library levy for fiscal year 2018 is $1,381,471. And that represents a 4.15% increase over last year. The operating levy request, which includes FICA and tort, which is insurance, is $1,179,083. The expenditures from that fund include salaries, benefits, services, supplies, media expenditures, and capital outlay, as well as a contingency. Our FICA expenses are $55,100. Insurance expenses are $12,600. All of this is itemized on page 2 of your packet. The library building and maintenance levy this year is $131,388, which is a 3.8% increase from the original 2017 levy. Expenditures from that fund include contractual services, building supplies, furniture and equipment, and a contingency as well. The IMRF levy for fiscal year 2018 is $71,000, which is an increase of 4.7% from last year. So the grand total, again, in summary, is $1,381,471.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about the library levy? Well, you got off easy. Thank you, Director Davis. I appreciate it. Okay, so now we will close the public hearing on the tax levy and move right on to the public hearing concerning the 2018 operating budget. We'll delay citizen comments until after both of our public hearings. So opening this public hearing, again, Deputy Clerk Haskey, can you confirm that our very diligent trustees are still at their seats?
Yes, all board members are still present.
Thank you.
And also the publication of this public hearing notice also appeared in the Doings newspaper on November 23rd, 2017.
Thank you. Moving on to the presentation of the 2018 operating budget. Trustee Wudoff, once again, you have the floor.
Thank you once again, President Gallagher. And once again, we will turn it over to Director Turi, who will walk us through the proposed 2018 budget.
Thank you, President Gallagher. It's my pleasure to present the proposed 2018 budget. The process started in August with a review of current operations and funding needs. Staff was directed to maintain same level of services. But of course, this process proved challenging as we not only dealt with local matters, but we were faced with the state's financial and fiscal woes. Ultimately, the state used a portion of our local distributed fund to balance their budget, therefore providing us a reduction of revenue, and also including in that was a challenge of the 14.5% increase of the police pension fund contribution. The small bedroom community with no industries and only a local business district, they're not always prepared or positioned to absorb these reductions. However, we did complete the budget process, and it was a thorough review by the organization and their respective committees. We had one last meeting on November 30th, which was a joint meeting of the Finance, Public Works, and Water Committee. And as a result of all those meetings, I'm pleased to present the 2018 operating budget for all funds. As you see, we have revenues budgeted at $23,980,024, and expenditures of $25,220,710. We budget each fund on an individual basis. Each fund operates individually, and each fund has their own revenue sources and outlined expenditures. The next chart is revenue sources for all funds. This chart is presented simply to point out that we are heavily dependent on property taxes. Property taxes in total are about $6 million and are pretty much included in all funds to provide services that we budget for. Jumping to the general fund, I am presenting here the general fund revenue broken out by the tax revenue sources. Again, property taxes present itself as the #1 revenue source for the fund at 42.17%. The other item that I want to point out again is the income tax line item, which is at 10.56%. This is another name for this is the local government distributed fund. This fund was reduced by 10% or $168,000, and that did impact us negatively as far as revenue sources for funding the general fund. In revenue, we had 5.98% increase in property taxes. We talked about during the hearing. We are presenting no new fees. We are not including any increases in existing fees, but we are again including a reduction in revenue of $168,000. On the expenditure side, I broke out expenditures by categories of type, and you see that salaries is the highest category, which is very typical for an organization of our nature. Next followed is contractual services, and again, I want to point out that another large number is contributions to the police and fire budget at 11% of the total general fund expenditures. Expenditures include 2.5% increase in wages, health insurance increase of 3%, 14.59 increase in police pension contribution, And in order to make in order to balance the general fund, because of the reduction in work distributed funds, and because we have to redirect $150,000 from operations to the police fund, we are utilizing an interest income credit to fund the contribution to the Irma premium. The next slide is simply to demonstrate all our operations and where the total dollars are being spent. General fund and capital improvement fund are basically the village's operating funds, and you'll note that the law enforcement department, as well as the fire and emergency medical services, are the largest public safety category. About 58% of the budget is allocated to public safety. In the capital improvement fund, we've identified purchases by expenditure by type, and we've also identified them by organization. We are going to be budgeted $1,162,462 in expenditures. We identified the expenditures, but in 2018 we will be identifying the funding source for those items, which may include loans, notes, or possibly a deferral of the expenditure. Also presented to you is the 2016 roadway construction fund. 2000 roadway referendum was passed in 2016 that allowed us to issue $12 million in bonds, in general obligation bonds, which we are now starting to pay back. The first segment of $4.5 million was issued in 2017. This $4.5 million should fund 3 years of roadway program. For 2018, we are scheduling work on Long and Johnson and Post Office Alley. And the water and sewer fund, this slide highlights the capital projects and purchases for 2018. In the water fund, we are proposing purchases of a high service pump, which is the first of 1 of 3 years. The purchase of membrane cartridges, which is the first of 4-year program. We're going to complete the roads and garden project, purchase vehicles and equipment, and then continue with our annual replacement of residential water meters. In the sewer fund, we are projecting a 2018 roadway program. We're going to continue televising the sewer system. We're going to do repairs to the Ridgewood Oak Basin, vehicle repairs in conjunction with sewer and with water purchases, and the sewer outfall repair Ridgewood Drive. And one of the outcomes that we had out of a joint meeting on November 30th was to develop a 5-year plan. We are recognizing that the 5-year plan is just a starting point for water and sewer, but the goal is to develop a 5-year plan that prioritizes capital projects, which would include distribution, flooding, and of course, well number 5. In conjunction with identifying prioritizing capital projects, we're going to be looking at identifying alternate revenue sources, which may include grants or IEPA loans. But layering that on top of that, we are going to continue to analyze the water and sewer rates so that we can correlate funding needs each year. The plan will be presented to the board in the first quarter of 2018 and will be the starting point of implementation of some significant projects. Lastly, I wanted to present the fire and police funding levels. It is, we talked about the police pension fund a few times in the presentation, and I just wanted to point out the funding levels. You see that in 2015 and 16, it looks like we stagnated a little bit in funding levels, but it's important to note that between those 2 years, there was a move to a more conservative mortality table, increasing the funding contribution, conversely decreasing the funding level. We hope that going forward with a better market return in 2017, that we should see a little uptick in the funding levels. Overall, I just want to like to thank the village manager for her guidance in preparing this document, and for the directors for their participation. And I'd also like to thank the board for your many hours of review. It truly has been a collaborative process. So I hope you have any questions. I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Turi, and thank you for your hard work on this, as well as that of your staff, senior staff and administration. Thank you. Does any board member have any questions or comments regarding the 2018 proposed operating budget?
I have two matters. Madam President, Director Turi, I note that in the general revenue fund, on page, I believe it's page 2 or 3, it shows all of the sources of the revenue.
Yes,
That licenses and permits are your second highest revenue source.
yes.
Is there any thought or any prediction on whether or not that may be increasing this year? Or is that a very conservative estimate?
It's a conservative estimate, but we did increase our building permits last year. I don't know. How did we increase them before?
Yeah, there was an increase. Trustee Sifferman, from 1.25% to 1.75%.
For building permits, and then for
Yeah.
vehicle licenses, we increased from $5 to $50 per vehicle. So incrementally, we don't see an increase in that happening at least for a few more years.
So those have already been realized.
Yes.
You're talking about what has already been.
Yes.
Yes.
And
yeah.
we did improve our collection rate on vehicle licenses this year, so we're implementing newer strategies to collect more of the stray resident.
Any way to predict whether new construction or any type of remodeling or any additional revenue generated by new housing or improved housing in the next year?
We factored in 40 new teardowns this year, which is consistent with what we've done in the past. Remodels are hard to pinpoint as to how much revenue we can drive on it. The biggest factor would be teardowns and what goes on in timber trails.
Okay.
May I just want
Sure, because I have
clarification?
one other
No,
related
and
to
I'll
this.
yield it back to you. So 1.75, just because you mentioned timber trails, that they have their own set rate
Yes.
as part of the annexation?
Mhm.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, sorry.
And I have another item to ask a question about, and that has to do with the water and sewer rates. I think it's important to, for all of us to better understand the distinction that's made between the expenses connected with water versus sewer, and the fact that these are a combined rate versus, simply just what we're all paying for water. That we have to take note of the differentiation between water and sewer funds and water and
Yes.
sewer issues.
In our on a budget basis, we do present the expenditures for water and sewer separately, but in the 5-year plan, as recommended by the joint committees, we will be presenting where the dollars are going to be spent and where the funding should come from. So the rate will be separated as to what goes to which fund.
Great, I just wanted to make sure that was amplified. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Now, could you explain a little about the police pension funding and why it's so low? I'm looking at, it was almost 60% just 5 years ago. We've dropped down 10%.
Yes,
Is it
that's a
just the
function
table?
of the mortality table being utilizing a more conservative table, and also going from, also using a 6.75 interest rate assumption. So once you plug in a more conservative assumption, the tendency is to reduce the funding level.
Conservative means the pensioners are living longer.
Exactly.
That's
Life expectancies are 82, 83.
That's why we went to a more conservative table.
Right.
But still using the 6.75% as the estimated return, compared to what we have realized so far this year, which has been
Yes,
over
this year
15.
has been over 15.
Right.
But
So
not
we'll-
all years have been
No,
over.
No, of course not. Of course not.
And that, as I understand it, will be reflected in next year's
Yes.
budget
we're 1 year in
calculations.
arrears as well. We won't, this, rate of return on 2017 won't be factored in until we do the evaluation early 2018.
So all signs will be pointing up as far as the funding for the police officers
Yes.
for next
hope.
year.
Hope.
Right.
But also maybe one point on that, aren't we mandated by a certain year to reach a certain level of funding? So the fact that we're short now.
We structured our fully funding to 2033, so we are always using that as our benchmark. And also, we are mandated by the state of Illinois to fund according to the actuary, whichever the actuary we use, by 2018. Otherwise, they will attach to our distributed funds.
Yeah, that's correct. The new amortization schedule takes you out to 2040. You have to be funded at a 90% level by 2040, but we're on a more aggressive, accelerated pace. So,
Which I think is a good policy. Anybody else? Okay. Are there any questions from the public or the press? Sure. Oh, can you use the microphone? Yes, please.
Thank you.
And just state your name, please.
David at the Doings. I was wondering how.
Turn it on.
Either David at the Doings. I was just wondering on the deficit, how that's made up here. I see the expenditures are more than
Yep.
the revenue on the total.
On the operating budget.
Yeah, on the operating.
Those funds are using reserves.
It is reserves.
Basically, that's what's driving it is we received $4.5 million in the roadway fund.
Okay.
And that's sitting in reserves, and now we're going to use about $1.6 million of those, so that's why there appears to be a deficit, because the money is already sitting in reserves.
Okay, thank you, that's all I had.
So it appears to be a deficit, but it's actually a balanced budget.
Exactly.
Anybody else? Okay. Any more discussion among our board members? No? Then the adoption schedule, we'll put this on the omnibus as well?
Correct.
Thank you. All right. That concludes our public hearing. We'll close the public hearing and now get on to the consideration of our agenda items. Moving first to Public Works and Water, Trustee Allen.
Thank you, President Gallagher. I'll try to be brief, but wanted to provide some context on the well number 5. And at the end, I will ask for some feedback and guidance on this, so stay tuned. As Director Turi mentioned, on Thursday, November 30th, there was a joint meeting of Finance, Public Works, and Water, and the Infrastructure Commission. At the meeting, we discussed the 5-year capital plan for infrastructure, which includes roads, water production, water delivery, and stormwater management, their priority, and the sources of revenue to fund this infrastructure plan. We discussed how water main and stormwater sewer improvements are often done in conjunction with road refurbishment to minimize tearing up roads to access. In most parts of the village, infrastructure plumbing resides below the roads. We also discussed the fact that about half of our village's 52 miles of water mains are over 80 years old. We also discussed the proposed new well number 5 and the well number 1 pre-treatment option to address system-wide water quality issues when there is a planned or unplanned shutdown of one of our existing 2 deep wells. As Director Supert and Plant Manager Duffy explained last Monday, pre-treated well number 1 water would require about a $77,000 one-time retrofit capital investment to the water treatment plant and about $150,000 to $200,000 of operating costs to deploy for about 1 month of usage. Resulting treated water quality would be very high under well number 1, but at nearly pure H2O quality, but results in a significant loss of nearly 50% of the water, and thus would not have been able to fully meet demand in about 25% of the days during the last 2 water events over the last 3 years. Deployment and equipment setup would take about 3 to 5 days. Well number 5, on the other hand, would be a new deep well currently targeted in Field Park. The preliminary cost estimate provided by Baxter and Woodman in 2016 dollars was about $3.1 million. Water quality would likely be comparable to our existing well number 3 and well number 4, as it may draw from the same aquifer. Exact water quality and depth of the well does require actual drilling to determine. The objective of the new well number 5 is to provide significantly improved water quality relative to the untreated shallow well number 1 water during periods of maintenance, which we have experienced 2 events in the last 3 years. In addition, while only 2 deep wells can run through the 2 RO reverse osmosis skids at the water treatment plant at the same time, it does provide some excess capacity to put water directly into the reservoir should water usage in the village grow over the years. Once well number 5 is fully operational, well number 1 would be permanently shut down. In terms of financing this project, an application for a low interest rate loan through the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency has been approved, but it has not yet been determined when it will be funded by the IEPA, and this decision could take months. More to come on this in a minute. There's been some additional juggling from our original loan application as the South Campus water stack, painting and maintenance, which was originally scheduled for 2018, has been deferred until 2019. As an alternative to the IEPA loan, we could issue other bonds, but these would carry a higher interest rate, driving up the cost of the overall project. The repayment of the loan will come from higher residential water rates than our current combined water and sewer rate of $12 per 1,000 gallons. The exact amount will likely be discussed in the January 2018 board cycle. Our current combined water and sewer rates were ranked 8th out of 20 neighboring villages. Lastly, over the next few months, we plan to roll out additional and improved communication on the village's infrastructure plan. Now, turning to the interactive part, at the meeting last Thursday, while no vote was taken, a consensus did emerge to pursue well number 5 and not pursue well number 1 pretreatment. However, this was contingent on the results of the interference testing, which is scheduled for this week. The part where I think we need to provide some feedback and guidance to staff relates to sort of the timing of this. There is this unknown about when and how much the IEPA loan will kick in, and that could impact both the timing of the project for well number 5, should we choose to go that direction, and its costs. So I think we need to think about, do we want to wait till we hear on the IEPA loan? Do we want to look at alternative bonds to fund a well number 5, or do some sort of hybrid type strategy? I think the concern would be that we don't know as of yet, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Super, exactly how long it might take until we get exact clarification in writing when we will know about the IEPA funding. It is a significant savings in terms of interest costs. But I think we've thought we wanted to do well number 5, but it's just sort of now getting to the financing of it. And I'm just trying to sense sort of our urgency to move forward with this project. Interest rates are, we don't know for sure, but at least on the short end, they're probably tending higher in the near term. And again, the project was scoped out on 2016 dollars. So waiting probably is not going to result in lower costs on that front as well too. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over, but Director Super, I don't know if you had any other clarification or modification points you wanted to make, or Director Turi on the financing on the loan part.
No, I think you did an excellent job in the summary, but most of our conversations.
And I should add, just for our residents, this has been something we've talked about at the board on multiple occasions. It's been through both the Infrastructure Commission as well as the Public Works and Water Committee, as well as discussed previously on several occasions at the board level. But I think we owe staff some guidance for their 2018 planning on kind of the timing and when we want to engage. I think it's primarily Baxter and Woodman on phase 1 and or phase 2 design engineering for this project to get started.
One question, the IEPA loan. Is it a question of timing that we would actually receive funds, or is it a question of whether we would actually qualify for the loan, or both?
So the project is approved as part of our project development report. We're in a waiting stage right now in categorical exclusion notification that I've talked about a couple times. My understanding is that it's actually emailed to us now. It's probably about a month process, but we have to do a public notification, a comment period, and so forth. After that, we would kind of get our loan application process approved, which normally means we're kind of off and running. The one thing that possibly needs to be modified as part of our original project development report would be the change in timelines. As part of our previous process, and as I mentioned from the Infrastructure Commission's process before, they were identifying a 5 to 7 year timeline on a well, and that's what we kind of put in our IEPA application. If we're looking at a process of accelerating or changing the time frame for our well construction and also possibly shifting some of the other timelines of other projects, you will need to submit that information back to the IEPA. What I don't know right now is what sort of, whether they consider that just an administrative sort of review, because the projects themselves aren't changing, it's just the timeline from, or if there's something more involved.
If we are in agreement in principle to go ahead with well number 5, the first step is the first part of the engineering, correct?
Yes.
So those expenditures for that sort of study and that sort of work would not be a lost cost in the event that we had any sort of issue in the near term with the funding, right? We need that study, we need that work regardless of our timing, correct?
Assuming we have the interference results though, right? Because then we know that the site is safe to begin doing the engineering work on.
Yeah, and that's where I think for some of this stuff in the next, let's say, 30 to 60 days, we'll kind of, I said, coalesce together a little bit more. Once we do have our project development, final approval after the categorical exclusion, the phase 1 and phase 2 engineering is absolutely funded. What we don't know is, again, where that timing kind of comes in with the resubmittal, if it's an issue at all. But also on the same token, we can't necessarily go to the IEP and resubmit if we don't know when we're doing the well and when the other projects are happening. So that's where staff is looking, again, as Trustee Allen mentioned, in the direction of, does the board want to do this sooner, in a shorter time frame, or is it still looking at 5 to 7 year initial timeline that we submitted?
But
So we need to kind of put that timeline together before it's a resubmission process.
But to Trustee Rudolph's comment, there's an unknown question, right? If we start incurring costs sooner, whether those will be reimbursable under the IEPA loan, or we would have to self-finance those. Is that correct?
Right, and that's again kind of where some of this timing comes into play. I think we'll have a better understanding of this categorical exclusion, the project plan, probably by January 1st. And then probably through January, maybe February, we'll have some better information as to what that turnaround time back to the IEPA would be.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just chime in, also if you're thinking about doing alternate revenue water bonds, as an alternative to the IEPA, one of the things in that process is approving what's called an authorization ordinance. It allows you, once you adopt that ordinance, to reach back 60 days to capture eligible expenses, professional fees, et cetera. But the real driver is everything after the adoption of that authorizing ordinance. Those eligible costs are clearly something that you can fund, with the bond. So you can two-track it. Now, I've done that on water projects before. You go after the IEPA loan. You also set in motion the bond approval process. That initial ordinance that you approve just sets you on the path towards going out for bonds. It doesn't commit you to anything, but what it does is it sets kind of the threshold time frame for the 60-day reach-back window, and then the going forward window of when of eligible project expenses that you incur, can clearly be captured within the bond issuance itself. The IEPA has a different kind of review process and standard of what's included and what's not as eligible costs. And it's in their application, and we can get you that information. But you could two-track it if you wanted, and you can break up the financing as well. If the well is going to cost X amount of dollars, and you want to fund part of it with bond money because you want to move forward a little quicker than the IEPA money becomes due, you could have a two-track funding process.
So it'd be like a bridge until we
Sort of like a bridge.
And just in terms of this timeline, even if we did have a lot of this other stuff with the IEPA loan locked in now, we probably wouldn't be seeing Baxter River or any sort of engineering process really kicking off in February or March anyways, because you're going to have to do an approval with their contract. You're going to have to go to the board. There's just kind of the procedural stuff we have to do at our own level, not to mention kind of the IEPA committee. So that's why this next 8-week period or so, we're trying to get some clarification answers from the IEPA, and we can get the new timeline preferences that helps facilitate that.
Provided that the interference test is fine, that we could build in that area, and if the board decides to direct staff to go ahead on the well number 5, then I think we can explore the accelerated schedule, and whatever we can do with financing and so forth. So,
So, and just to, at the risk of beating it, the trade-off is if the project's going to take however many months, maybe a year, year and a half, once we get started. We have a well number 4 maintenance coming in a few years, but it's the trade-off of speed versus cost, really, and it's just not sure which direction we want to go on that. Because we are in, right now, no better situation or no worse situation than we are today, which we saw the impact that can have on our residents.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Trustee Allen. Anybody else? Any other, did you have any other?
Well, I guess I'm not sure I understand what our direction is, because we had initially talked of possibly voting on this in 2 weeks. We'll know the interference testing. Maybe we'll have a little bit different, or a little bit of additional information on this financing, the 2-track system, but I don't think we're going to have ultimate clarity. And I guess when I think about it, and Director Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, a $3 million project, if the interest rate differential is 2%, that's $60,000 a year. That's going to add up for the time of the bond. So, I just want to make sure we're making the right short-term and long-term decision on this one, because it's a big project. So, I guess I'm still not feeling which way we're kind of headed on this.
It might be my impression, but it seems like the funding situation from the IEPA is a little bit more iffy than when we talked about it on Thursday, in terms of the actual availability of the funds, when we would have them in hand.
I didn't hear it as...
I don't think that's changed.
I think the timing is iffy, not whether we would eventually get it or not.
We would eventually get it, but just in terms of the timing, because for me, the concern is, as you mentioned, we're no better than we were the last time we had a situation with one of the wells, and at the risk of debating the consensus about doing something with well number 1, that still leaves me a little concerned about what our options are short term, and whether that $70,000 investment to fit the plant to be able to accept a temporary skid might make sense. Because if we're a couple years away from having well number 5 up and in use, that the risk of something happening, and especially with well number 4's maintenance creeping onto the calendar as well, is that something that we should talk about a little bit more?
Well, I think that what's changed is our feeling of urgency regarding the project, because initially I think we were just waiting until the IEPA loan approval to move ahead, and now we see that perhaps that's not the best option. If we're able to, we know that approval is coming, right? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, our projects have been approved.
Right. Including
the
this.
difference between the project approval and the loan approval, it's kind of 2 separate components. So the projects have been approved. They are acceptable projects in terms of the IEPA's approval.
It's just that
Including the well.
they don't have the funding for all of the projects that are submitted to the
Including the
IEPA.
well.
But
Right.
not all communities go through with their projects.
And
Right.
what that, a lot of that kind of comes into play is, again, we had an assumption of the project schedules that was submitted to them last year. And if we're changing that, we will have to kind of do some resubmission.
But the well 5 has been approved by them, the well 5?
It is identified as an acceptable project.
As one of the projects, okay. So these other communities go into the queue, but if they don't have the matching funds in order to participate, then we bump up in the funding process.
We would have to be in a position where we would be ready for construction already.
Right. So we would have to have phase 1 engineering in place, you're saying?
Potentially phase 2.
And potentially.
But we can get to our loan, application of approval, and let's say even we identify initially at 2019, well, 2019 is probably the target year anyways, is at 2020. And the funding opened up the year before, if you are in that process approved, have some of your engineering accomplished, you could potentially move up with that funding. But I think kind of what all of this other stuff, talking about the loan, with the IG loan or other funding, all kind of comes down to, I think the basic question that staff is looking for is, we need you to tell, yes, we're pursuing on this side. We need that to get even to these other components of exploring the other 2 loan options and getting forward with that.
But going back to Trustee Timick, where he felt that it was a good idea to perhaps spend the $77,000 to retrofit the water treatment plant. If we voted on that, let's say on December 18th, and we do decide to retrofit to the treatment plant to accommodate the skid for well number 1, what is that time frame? Like, are we talking 6 months? is,
We don't have a construction, I would anticipate we could certainly complete that project in 2018, but we haven't, all we've done is that preliminary technical memo.
okay.
And also, I think it's important to know that that one was the one where we thought it wouldn't have worked for several of the days during both of the last two outings.
Right, I'm aware of that.
In the 3 to 5 day setup. So it's a nice concept to have the insurance, but I
But
think
it's not great insurance.
it's not foolproof.
Right.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
it'd still be something that would.
There's a copay with it, yeah.
There's a copay deductible.
I still believe that sounds a bit more of a Band-Aid, and I'm personally in favor of pursuing what is our permanent solution at a time frame with the urgency that we've discussed.
Well-
I'd like to see us begin the plan for well number 5.
What I'm concerned with, though, is the conversations are being had as if it's an either-or situation. I'm actually suggesting we do both.
both.
It's a belts and
Right.
suspenders sort of
Understood.
approach is the
Well-
way I would look at it.
And it is a Band-Aid situation, but if you're bleeding, you need a Band-Aid, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, that, I agree with trustee Timick. I think that it's
Well, the
risky
thing
to
is,
not do
It's
either.
risky.
With our limited resources too, do we want to do that when 50% of what comes out of well one goes directly to waste, correct? With the,
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number, but you're talking several hundred of the GPM that go directly to waste and not be treated.
and
Is
when
that
we're
fixed?
talking,
Is that fixed? Can that be?
No, because the unit is a 400 GPM unit, so the well outputs approximately 730 something gallons per minute. About 530 of that can directly go to the units, but only 400 gallons per minute can be processed. The remaining 138 is part of the waste.
and if we're talking a 3 to 5 day setup time, that's what it would require to get that up and running for well one, then the damage has been done. In essence, you know, the residents already have
Right.
the discolored water. So, it's up to you ultimately, but I guess my personal feeling is to direct our resources to implementing well 5 as rapidly as possible.
I agree and hope that we would pursue this in a way that turns this long-term goal into a shorter-term goal
Agreed.
and not a longer or longest-term solution. And pursue that as quickly as we can.
Well, and to that point, we've already contacted some of our elected officials to help us try to accelerate
Yes.
the loan application. So I think that can be pushed as well, too.
Yes. Not only local, national reps as well.
I still think we're taking a risk. I wasn't here last Thursday, I apologize for that, but it sounds like, from what I missed, that the consensus is that 77,000 is an unnecessary Band-Aid. I'm not so sure of that. I don't think that's a lot to spend if we're talking about 3 years till well number 5 is going to be up. I just think that's something we should look at. Maybe the technology would change in 3 years, and these machines, whatever we'd be renting on the skid, would be maybe more efficient than 50%. But I'm a little concerned about just putting that off and keeping my fingers crossed that for the next 3 years or 4 years till we have well number 5 built up, that nothing bad's going to happen.
I think we're looking at a much shorter time frame, but I think, again, agreeing then with trustee Timick, that we may not be an either-or, right? That it may have to be
Both.
pursuing both.
Well, and just to clarify, it's a 77 upfront fee and then 150 to 200 every time we use
run.
it.
But
Per
it is possible that we could spend $77,000 and never use it.
True.
Correct?
Absolutely,
So I
yeah.
mean, that could, in an ideal world, that would be the only expense involved with it.
Yep.
No copay,
Right, no copay.
just the 77, right?
Right, and that's per month, the 150 to 200,000 per month, so.
Right.
But they would be going much more in a month.
Well,
From
the
what,
last one
2
was
events?
2 months, wasn't it? That the well was,
So
we
yeah,
were-
just to clarify, the additional 30-day increments were not quite as high.
Oh.
They were in the around $30,000 to $40,000 range for additional 30. But
oh,
to build upon that, almost all of our instances where we've had to do the emergency repairs or instances, they've all gone over 1 month. The shortest one was approximately 6 weeks. This past instance we had with the electrical issue, we were looking at almost 4 months until we kind of had full capabilities back to the board.
And that's why I thought the 3 to 5 day startup ramp wasn't all that unreasonable, because those were prolonged outages. And so we would, I'll say, get our money's worth. I mean, I'd rather, as
That's a
much
good
as I hate
point.
to say it, I'd rather dump 50% of the water and get 50% good water, so we're not sending 100% of well one into the system and really impacting
Right.
the residents.
But still looking at that as just more of a shorter-term
Oh,
solution
absolutely.
while we're moving forward on well number 5, correct?
No
Right,
question.
no one is thinking,
Right,
I don't,
that
at
that's
this
anything,
point, that well
right.
one is a permanent solution. This would be the Band-Aid that Ed
Right.
referenced.
Absolutely, it needs to be clear, I'm 100% supportive of well number 5, because I
Right.
think we need it long-term, along with the other updates or improvements to the distribution system. I just think I think, as Trustee Terrell said, we're sort of rolling the dice a little bit here, hoping that nothing bad happens in the meantime.
And
Well,
I-
I can also point out too that the well number 1 work decision can also occur, I believe, in 2018, once we have a better timeline from the IPA.
Okay.
That's not necessarily an issue that the board needs to vote on in December here. That's entirely separate, that is not a project that was identified as part of the IPA loan process anyways. So we can certainly revisit the well number 1 treatment component in January, February, once we have a better understanding of what our funding mechanisms may be and what our timeline may be.
That's a good point, yeah. We don't have to make both decisions at the same time.
I'd be fine with that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Well, this might be a good time to open up the meeting to our citizens to see if there's any public comments. Mr. Vespa, welcome.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Of course.
Couple items. Number one, I wanted to thank the village manager for providing responses to my questions from last week in a very timely manner. It was very thorough and good to know. Second of all, would like to thank our police department for promptly responding to my home when the alarm went off in the middle of the night. They were very responsive and helpful in making sure that everything was safe, especially with the update from last week on a number of cars that were broken into, et cetera. The third item is there's been 2 comments made tonight during the opening part of the meeting about notices and the doings. I guess my question is what communications are going out? Because residents have to pay for the doings. So residents that are not receiving the doings, is it emailed out? Is there something that you can select on the website to get these notices so that way if you don't have a doings, you are getting the communications that are going out?
It's posted at Village Hall, but do we have other?
I sign up for all the things on the website and get all the emails. I'm just wondering if this is an option to include it in the email updates.
I see.
That go out, because that's free and people don't have to pay for the doings
Right.
for that. Just something to consider.
That's a good point.
2 more, I apologize. The next one is our refuse and recycle services. When is that contract up? I've been doing some searching at crosstown costs. We seem to be significantly higher in our costs for these services than villages like Burr Ridge, Willowbrook, et cetera. Would just like to know that when that contract is coming close, if there could be a more thorough understanding to residents about what drives our costs significantly higher than other surrounding towns.
I believe we have about 1 more year on our
Yes,
contract.
it's coming up in December of next year.
Okay.
And I know that we have already discussed it with General Government Committee that we're going to be beginning negotiations.
Okay. And then finally, just because you held citizens' comments till after the water update, I do want to share that I'm a little concerned and disappointed in this trustee board's approach to this well number 5. There was a couple items that were mentioned tonight, and I'm not quite certain how you're making decisions without all the facts. It was said that, first of all, that the cost estimates that you're making decisions on were from 2016. How do you know that didn't go up 20, 30% for 2018? And number 2, it was stated that there's going to be another increase to residents in our water bill, but you don't know what that cost is yet.
We are working on that.
I understand, but we've had 2 increases in our water rates, over the past 18 months. In addition to that, we had the $5 assessment attached to our water rates, which I thought is what that $5 assessment was supposed to pay for, was projects like this. At some point, I understand that we're in the middle of the pack when you look at, but we're slowly creeping up is going to be one of the more expensive towns. At some point, we have to stop continually looking at every project we want to do, means that the residents just have to continue to pay more. At some point, there has to be a stop to the water rate increases, at least for a couple years, and it seems like we may be going on our third in 2.5 years, plus the $5. So I'd ask you to take those into consideration before you make decisions, and let the public know, let the residents know what these increases are going to be, to hear feedback from the residents before making final decisions. I understand urgency, don't get me wrong, I understand loan processes, but you should be informing the residents of what these impacts are and hearing feedback from the residents before jumping to a decision.
You make very valid points, Mr. Vespa, and we discussed at length at our last meeting about improving our communication as we make these decisions. And so that is upfront in our process and in our thought process. As far as the capital fee that was assessed, we need time to build that up. Yes, that is going to help us with these projects so that we don't have to keep going back to the residents in the future, but that's been in place now for a year, I believe.
Actually, not even, right?
Less than a year, and so we just don't have the funds yet to apply it towards our these are big ticket items, sewers and water main linings and things like that. So that is the goal.
I understand and I appreciate that, but I've never seen someone come back and go, hey, we've built up the excess, we can now drop your water payments.
That is also our goal.
So I'm just saying, I think it would be very helpful before you make a hard decision that you at least get a few more of the facts and let residents know what they are, and that you know what they are and what the impact is to the residents before making a final decision.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vespa. Anybody else? If not, we'll return to our agenda items. Moving on to Properties and Recreation, Trustee Hanson.
No report tonight, Madam President.
Thank you. Finance, Trustee Rudolph. Once again, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to call your attention to a number of ordinances and resolutions that we will be addressing at our next meeting. If you look at your agenda, we're going to go a little bit out of order here. So we're first going to go to what you see in your packet as Ordinance C. And these all reflect back to what we discussed during the public hearings in terms of the levy and then also in terms of the operating budget that we'll get to at the resolution. But the first ordinance, again, C in your packet, it's for the 2017 levy, again, as mentioned in our public hearing. Okay, then we're going to look at an ordinance. I'm going to go up now to A and B, which will be the ordinances that will direct the county to separate the library from the village in terms of our levies in the event of any changes, any decreases. And then also your item B, that specific ordinance there tells the county that if it is reduced, that we will just reduce our general funds. So in terms of the presentation that you saw, we just want to make sure that that would be where that reduction would apply. Let's see, moving on to our next one then. In order, D, our fourth one here, is the ordinance that would approve 3 abatements that I would have to defer to Director Turi for more details on, but 2012A, 2012B, and 2015A, which ensure that we are not levying any taxes for repaying debt service. Moving on to item E, we would have a resolution that would approve our 2018 operating budget as we discussed in the public hearing. Item F would be a resolution approving a budget amendment that we had in our packets. We have in our packets from Director Schramm. We did discuss it last week at our meeting. It's in the amount of $4,864. And I need to get my attention to that, that was a budget amendment added to the software account. That was replacing money that was reimbursed to the village through the West Central Cable Agency grant for replacing 2 of the cameras. And sorry, going back to one of the, we have a change at our dais here in terms of the actual text. And Director Turi, sorry, remind me of which one that was.
Okay.
Okay.
After the package was prepared, we made some changes to the budget budget and the new resolution reflects those changes.
Okay, so that's what you had at your desk here. Thank you. Thank you very much. And finally, let's make sure I'm here in order. We don't have new reports as of now on the fire pension fund or the police pension fund. I believe I've got that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Rudolph. Any questions of Trustee Rudolph? No. Moving on to Public Health and Safety, Trustee Sifferman.
Madam President, colleagues, village staff, members of the public in attendance, and those following on the television presentation here this evening. With the holiday season in full swing upon us, I'm taking this opportunity to amplify the holiday public safety awareness documents that you have in your packet, prepared by Chiefs Buds and Kenny. And you can make reference to these and review these in your packets if you haven't already done so. While for many of us, this is a special holiday season of giving, and as such, our attentions are so laser focused on procuring gifts for our loved ones and developing the various complex itineraries and logistics of the holiday parties we will be traveling to, that we often forget about the need to ensure our own personal safety during this busy season. We must remember that for the criminal mind, it is their season of taking advantage of our distraction from our attention and safety, taking our personal property, and taking our whole holiday season. We've heard it said many times that the crime and criminals never take holidays. Let's take the criminal felons' season of taking away from them by locking our cars, securing our gifts in safe places, parking in well-lighted areas as we shop, keeping our household gifts out of plain sight through doors and windows, keeping our residence portals well lit during the night. Household and motor vehicle accidents hide in waiting to ruin our holidays. Holidays, particularly for those of us who ignore the simple precautionary steps that are designed to defeat the arrival of these uninvited guests of holiday accidents and motor vehicle accidents. Proper freshly cut tree care, Christmas tree care, and prudent holiday party alcohol use can reduce the chances of ruining an entire family's holiday season. I'm offering tonight our gratitude to Chiefs Buds and Kenny for preparing their winter and holiday safety awareness reports, and ask that these be posted in some version on the holiday website, on the village website. That concludes my report. Thank you, Chiefs.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Sifferman. Moving on to General Government Committee, Trustee Timmick.
No report this evening.
Thank you. Moving on then to Planning and Zoning Committee, Trustee Turl.
I have no report either, thanks.
Thank you. For my report, you'll see the resume of Thomas J. Brescia in your packet. He is a resident of Western Springs, and he has agreed to be our adjudication officer effective January 1st, 2018. Please review his resume, and if there's no objection, we will be appointing him this evening or at the next meeting? At the next meeting.
Next meeting, yes.
Thank you. Also, Aaron Piotrowski has agreed to become a member of the Recreation Committee for a 3-year term to expire in December 2020, and we will be doing that appointment, if there's no objection, at our next meeting. Also, I'd like to thank staff for attending the flag-raising ceremony outside Village Hall today at noon. We are kicking off the celebration of the bicentennial of the state of Illinois becoming a State of the Union. The actual date of the 200th anniversary is next December 3rd, 2018. but the state has asked that local municipalities kick off today and celebrate throughout the year our great states becoming part of the union. And also, I'd like to let you know that I attended the McCook Reservoir ribbon cutting ceremony today. You may know that that is the last bit of the TARP project, which will help to alleviate overflow in our combined water and sewer systems. So that will directly impact our combined water and sewer system here in Western Springs as well. If you have time, they have a visitor center over there at 76th and LaGrange Road. You can see the what was the quarry and is now the storage facility, and it's really very impressive. And with that, that concludes my report. Village Manager Velkme?
Well, I didn't have a report, but I just have one more clarification here.
Oh, thank you.
I don't want to beat a dead horse either, but it is the consensus, I'm assuming it is the consensus of the board that we would like to accelerate our plans to go ahead with well number 5.
Yes, I believe that is the consensus.
That's right.
Yes.
Which we will vote on at the next meeting.
Next meeting.
Pending the interference testing.
Very good. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Village Attorney Joseph?
No further report tonight.
Thank you. Is there any other business? Hearing now, Trustee Timick, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ladies and gentlemen, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You guys, usual, if you can.
I've got an early flight tomorrow,
All
thanks.
right.